I never thought much about my stepdad before. Mark always seemed like the kind of person everyone trusted, charming, helpful, the type of guy who could make anyone laugh in a room. Mom, Sarah, absolutely adored him. And me? I had learned to treat him as family. But lately something felt off. It started with little things, the kind of things you almost ignore until they begin to pile up. The way he'd laugh a little too long at his phone, or the way he'd disappear for work meetings that didn't quite make sense. At first, I told myself I was imagining things, that maybe I was just being paranoid. But deep down, I couldn't shake it. I started noticing the small patterns. The late-night text messages that made his phone vibrate incessantly. I'd catch glimpses of words before he'd flip the screen or shove it in his pocket. Emojis, cryptic letters, sometimes just the initial, R. I didn't know who R was, but every time I saw it, a pit formed in my stomach. It wasn't just the secrecy, it was the way he seemed different when he was texting. His smile softened, his voice took on a lighter tone, almost flirtatious. That alone should have set off alarms, but I kept convincing myself that adults had friendships I couldn't understand. There were other things too. A stray lipstick mark on a napkin in the kitchen drawer. The faint scent of perfume lingering in his jacket. And sometimes, when Mom would ask him about his day, I'd notice a brief flicker of tension in his eyes, like he was hiding something, but quickly masked it with a joke or a laugh. At first, I ignored it, thinking I was reading too much into harmless actions. But the more I saw, the harder it became to turn away. I felt trapped between disbelief and the creeping certainty that something wasn't right. Mark was always so easygoing around us, so helpful. He'd carry groceries in after a long day, make coffee just the way Mom liked it, ask about my homework, even offer to drive me to school. He was the ideal stepdad on the surface. But those small, strange details gnawed at me. The way he'd glance at his phone when he thought no one was looking, the sudden nervous energy when I asked him a casual question, the odd smiles after brief phone calls. All of it began to form a pattern I couldn't ignore. I wanted to trust him, I really did. But something in my gut screamed that I couldn't. I started paying more attention, trying to rationalize things in my mind. Maybe it was a harmless crush, a friend he hadn't told us about, something innocent. I wanted to believe that. But then, one evening, I saw it. A text on his phone as he left it unattended for a moment. Just one glance, one small line that made my stomach twist. "Can't wait to see you tonight, Red Heart." My hands shook as I stared at the screen. I didn't want to read more, but the pull of curiosity was stronger than my fear. I didn't recognize the number, only the initial R, and a chill ran down my spine. I tried to distract myself by focusing on school, on my friends, on anything that could push the thought away. Lisa noticed I was quieter than usual and asked if everything was okay. I shrugged it off, forced a smile, but inside I was unraveling. I couldn't tell her, not yet. I didn't even know what I was feeling. Anger, confusion, betrayal, fear. All of it tangled together, making it hard to think clearly. I felt like I was standing on a cliff, unsure if the ground would hold beneath me if I let myself fall. The nights became the hardest. Mom would go to bed early, Mark would stay up in his office, and I'd lie in my room listening. Sometimes I thought I heard faint laughter, a low conversation that stopped as soon as I neared the door. I tried to convince myself it was just the television or my imagination. But every instinct screamed that it wasn't. My mind replayed every moment, every small sign I had brushed off, and a pattern began to emerge. I was beginning to see him differently, not just as my stepdad, but as someone capable of something I never imagined he could do. I couldn't talk to Mom yet. She was happy, unsuspecting, blissfully unaware of the tension building beneath the surface of our family life. And I couldn't confront Mark, at least not yet. So I kept quiet, watching, listening, feeling the weight of the secret I couldn't even fully understand. Every day, the pit in my stomach grew. Every smile he gave, every helpful gesture, carried with it a subtle tension I couldn't ignore. And one thought echoed in my mind over and over. I knew something was happening. I just didn't know how far it went, or what it would mean when I found out. Then came the day I saw the text again, clearer this time, and my heart stopped. The words weren't subtle, the emoji unmistakable. My stepdad. He wasn't just hiding something small. And I realized, with a cold certainty, that my family as I knew it might never be the same. After that first text, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time Mark left the room, I found myself glancing at his phone, or rather, I wanted to. I knew it wasn't mine to read, but the curiosity was unbearable. One evening, he left it on the kitchen counter while he made a call for work. My fingers itched to peek, but I forced myself to step back. Instead, I started paying closer attention to his movements. Where he went, who he met, what he said. Everything suddenly mattered. It started with small observations. He left the house for a lunch meeting with a colleague at a nearby cafe. Mom thought nothing of it. She trusted him completely. I didn't. I followed him, or rather, trailed behind at a distance, careful to remain unseen. My heart pounded as I watched him enter the cafe, the way he smiled, the way he leaned in just slightly when talking. Then I saw her. Rachel. I had heard the name whispered in a text, and there she was, unmistakable, standing too close, laughing a little too easily. I felt my stomach twist. They didn't notice me at first, and I wasn't sure if I wanted them to. I stayed hidden behind a tree, my eyes fixed on them. They talked and laughed, their gestures intimate, touching hands lightly, leaning in to whisper, their expressions soft and personal. It wasn't just friendship. I knew it immediately, like a cold wave washing over me. Every instinct screamed betrayal. The person I had trusted, my stepdad, was doing something I never imagined possible. And she, Rachel, she wasn't even trying to hide it. I felt a mix of disbelief and anger. I wanted to storm in, to confront them both, to scream and demand answers. But I stayed frozen, afraid of what that confrontation might mean. What it would do to my family, to Mom, to the fragile illusion of trust that had always existed in our home. I wanted to turn away, but my eyes remained locked on them. Every subtle touch, every quiet laugh a dagger twisting in my chest. When I got home, I couldn't speak. Mom asked me about my day, but I barely heard her. My mind replayed every moment, the brush of a hand, the tilt of a head, the whispered words I couldn't hear but imagined anyway. I tried to push it aside, to focus on something normal, homework, texts from Lisa, the hum of the refrigerator, but nothing worked. That scene had burned itself into my memory, and it refused to fade. The next day, I tried to act normal, but it was impossible. Mark was cheerful, humming in the kitchen, asking if I wanted help with breakfast. I forced a smile, kept my voice steady, but inside I was boiling. I couldn't confront him. Not yet. I didn't know what to say. And Mom, I couldn't burden her with it until I was certain, until I had proof that wouldn't be dismissed as imagination or paranoia. I needed more evidence. That night, I waited until the house was quiet. The lights were dim. Mom had gone to bed, and Mark was in his office. I approached his desk slowly, pretending to look for something. His phone was there, unlocked just for a moment as he stepped away. And there it was, the message, the unmistakable proof. I can't stop thinking about last night, Red Heart. My heart skipped, my hands trembled. It wasn't just words anymore. It was undeniable. He was cheating, and my family was being torn apart right under my nose. I backed away silently, not touching anything, my mind racing. I didn't know what to do first. I wanted to yell, to cry, to confront him immediately, but a small voice whispered that I had to be careful. One wrong move, and everything could explode. I paced my room for hours, replaying the words, imagining the scene again and again. I wanted to tell someone, Lisa, Mom, but fear held me back. This secret was mine to carry for now, and it felt unbearably heavy. The next few days were a tense blur. I watched Mark closely, noting every suspicious glance at his phone, every hurried excuse. I noticed how he became tense when I entered a room unexpectedly, how he carefully avoided certain topics. I observed the subtle changes in his behavior. The way his hands would fidget, the way he smiled nervously when Mom mentioned work. Every detail was a confirmation of what I already knew, and yet, Part of me still hoped I was wrong. One evening, Mark left for another work dinner. This time, I decided to follow him further, to see more than just a cafe meeting. He drove to a small, quiet restaurant on the outskirts of town. And there she was again, Rachel, waiting, smiling, leaning into him like they shared a secret no one else could understand. My chest tightened, anger and heartbreak mixing into a sharp, bitter feeling I couldn't shake. I wanted to confront them, but I stayed hidden, letting the scene unfold in silence. That night, when I finally returned home, I sat on my bed staring at the ceiling. My hands still shook. My stepdad, the person I thought I could trust, had been hiding a life I never imagined. And I realized that my next step, deciding whether to confront him, to tell Mom, or to stay silent, would change everything. I didn't know what to do, but one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The day I decided to tell Mom felt heavier than anything I had ever done. I sat on my bed for what felt like hours, rehearsing the words in my head, wondering how to say it without shattering her completely. Every scenario ran through my mind: her crying, yelling, blaming herself, or maybe disbelief. But keeping it inside was unbearable. I couldn't watch her trust and love someone who had betrayed her, not knowing what I had discovered. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling slightly, and walked toward her room. "Mom, I need to tell you something," I said softly, my voice shaking. She looked up from her book, concerned. "It's about Mark." My stomach twisted as I tried to explain everything I had seen and heard. I described the texts, the lunches, the subtle gestures, the restaurant, the evidence I had gathered. I didn't include names, at least not at first, trying to shield her from the worst while giving her the truth. She went silent for a long moment, just listening, processing. I could hear her take a shaky breath, and then I noticed the tremor in her hands as she put down her book. The room felt heavy, almost suffocating. I wanted to reach out, to hold her, but I stayed back, letting her absorb the reality of what I had uncovered. Her shock was palpable, even without seeing her face clearly, just the quivering of her lips, the way her fingers fidgeted with the edge of the blanket. Then came the anger. Quiet at first, simmering under the surface, but growing. She whispered questions I couldn't answer. Why? When? How long? I tried to explain that I didn't know, only that the evidence was clear and undeniable. The room felt tense, each pause stretching longer than the last. I could hear the quickened beat of my own heart, echoing the confusion and pain in the house. Mom's trust had been broken, and I felt the weight of carrying the truth. Mark came home later that evening, oblivious at first, unaware of the storm waiting for him. Mom confronted him immediately, her voice trembling but firm. I stayed in my room, listening. I didn't need to see it to understand what was happening. The raised voice, the stammered denials, the subtle avoidance, it all told me the truth. He was guilty, and the cracks in our family that I had sensed for weeks were widening into something undeniable. The silence that followed was almost worse than the confrontation itself, heavy and oppressive, filled with tension that settled into every corner of the house. In the days that followed, life changed. Mom was quieter, more guarded, and Mark, he tried to act normal, but the tension was palpable. I watched from a distance as they navigated the aftermath. I noticed the subtle gestures. Mom avoiding his gaze, folding laundry more methodically, Mark lingering near the door longer than necessary. Every movement, every quiet sigh, told a story of guilt, regret, and heartbreak. And through it all, I felt like a witness to a fragile world that had been upended, trying to piece together the fragments of a life that had once felt secure. I spent hours reflecting, trying to understand the complexity of what had happened. I realized that betrayal isn't always loud or violent. Sometimes it's quiet, hidden in whispers, gestures, and secret smiles. Mark's actions weren't just a betrayal of Mom. They were a betrayal of our family, our sense of security, the trust one had once taken for granted. And yet, despite the hurt, I also recognized a truth about human flaws. People make choices, and sometimes those choices are selfish, cruel, or careless. Understanding that didn't make it hurt any less, but it helped me process it. I also thought about my own role in this. The guilt of knowing and staying silent weighed heavily on me. But I realized that speaking up had been the only way to protect Mom, to confront the situation before it grew even more destructive. I felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and a strange sense of responsibility. Growing up sometimes means facing the complexity of adults, the messy truths that aren't black and white, and the weight of secrets you wish you never knew. By the end of the week, the house had settled into a tense rhythm. Conversations were careful, laughter rare, and trust had to be rebuilt slowly, brick by brick. Mom had decided to focus on herself, seeking clarity and support from friends, while Mark attempted to make amends, though I could see the guilt in his posture, the hesitation in his voice. I stayed close to Mom, offering quiet support, my own feelings a mixture of sadness, betrayal, and cautious hope. One night, as I lay in bed, I thought about everything that had happened. I realized that life would never return to the same simplicity it once had. My family had changed, irrevocably, but maybe not irreparably. I had learned a harsh lesson about trust, human imperfection, and the quiet devastation that betrayal can bring. But I had also learned about resilience, the ability to face pain, acknowledge it, and find a way to move forward. I whispered to myself, the words soft but resolute. I couldn't change what happened, but I can choose how I move forward. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a fragile sense of control, a small light piercing the heaviness. I didn't know what the future held, and I didn't know if our family could ever fully heal. But I knew one thing. I had survived the truth, faced the pain, and learned that sometimes the hardest part of growing up is witnessing the imperfections of the people we love most.